Hello, everyone. My name is Kaerie Ray, and I am curator for the archive at the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Foundation. Thank you for joining me today for this textile tour of Mabel's 1925 wedding gown, part of our milestone moment celebration of the 100-year wedding anniversary of Arnold and Mabel Beckman. Today, we are going to step back in time to the summer of 1925 to June 10th in New York State to explore a unique piece of bridal fashion. Mabel's gown is an interesting one to study in that it somewhat defied tradition. Previously, bridal fashion was relatively confined to the formal Victorian style, which was characterized by a fitted bodice, long sleeves, full skirt, and a high neckline. Suddenly, there were other choices, the freer modern silhouettes of the Art Deco movement. And as we get started, I'm going to draw a bit of attention to an important part of the story of Mabel's wedding gown. The artifact that I'm about to share with you was placed into the custody of the Caltech archives by the Beckmans themselves for the purpose of display, described as Mabel's wedding gown. So that's a firsthand description of the artifact by the owner. And upon transfer, the artifact moved from the Caltech archives to the Beckman Foundation archives, and we provided this same information. The gown was Mabel's 1925 wedding gown, placed into custody by the Beckmans themselves and identified as such. So this is the provenance of the artifact. And at the same time, the foundation has in its collection photographs provided by the Beckmans of their wedding, which show Mabel wearing what appears to be a different gown. So the foundation also has a published account from a local newspaper dated June 12th, 1925, which includes details of the entire ceremony and the bride's ensemble. So these details match the gown worn by Mabel in the photographs from the Beckman Foundation archive. So photographs provided by the Beckmans of their wedding. So we have two sets of artifacts provided as firsthand evidence of their wedding. And of course, this creates questions. So the most probable explanation for this is what we will call the second gown theory, which is to suggest that, like many brides even today, Mabel may have had a second gown that she changed into for her reception or her getaway, as some people affectionately refer to it, the outfit that one puts on prior to departing for their honeymoon. And this may be the gown that we're looking at today. So sometimes we don't get answers to these types of questions, or we do not get answers quickly. So we have to operate based on the information that we are given. And in this case, we have two sets of information given by the same person. So we will consider the gown today using the information which was provided by its owner. So Mabel opted for a gown that leaned modern with a short hemline and use of an airy fabric, but nodded toward tradition with some custom lace work. And here's Mabel's choice. So for the mid-1920s, Mabel's gown represents a really striking example of modern bridal wear. It was worn during a summer ceremony, and it featured a short hemline and short puffed sleeves. It was also constructed from a lightweight yet luxurious fabric. It's similar to a cotton silk. So it was ideal for the season's heat and the 50+ guests that Arnold and Mabel invited to take part in their big day, which created a really close-knit atmosphere at the church and reception. Little historical context here. The year that Arnold and Mabel were married, 1925, was a year of cultural transformation. This was during a time in the United States known as the Jazz Age, or the Roaring '20s. Was post-World War I, and people were embracing new freedoms. For women, those new freedoms extended to how they dressed. So in Greenpoint, where the Meinzers live, the Meinzers, where this is where the Beckman's wedding reception was held. These are Mabel's parents, her family. It was an historically working class neighborhood with a growing Polish American community and a significant Jewish population. So there was a diverse cultural landscape. And the weddings during that time were both traditional and evolving. So the design of Mabel's gown reflected a real blend of heritage style and modernity. So some of the design details that you're seeing on this garment, we'll take a closer look here at the design. It's a century-old garment. So beginning with its hemline, in June of 1925, Mabel is just 24 years old. The short hemline is a bold and youthful choice, and one that nods toward a modern style that's really growing in popularity. So the short puffed sleeves are practical and romantic. And the lace is adding a touch of the ornate here, something delicate to an otherwise uncomplicated silhouette, creating a real sense of timeless elegance, which would have really resonated with Greenpoint's European-influenced aesthetic. In terms of construction and materials, on a hot June day in Brooklyn, a lightweight, breathable fabric like that in Mabel's gown made for the perfect choice. The lace was all hand applied, and the construction suggests a balance between comfort and sophistication. This is possibly made by a local dressmaker or maybe even a family seamstress. There are no tags sewn into this garment and no brand names attached. A really close inspection of the garment reveals a combination of machine and hand stitching, although there's a good deal of work here on the dress that's hand stitched. And it's likely due to the really delicate nature of the fabric and the lace selections. And the closures on the back are all hook and eye. So here, talk a little bit about fashion trends. The fashion, as I mentioned, is evolving during this time. So for brides, the influences are coming from Parisian designers like Lanvin and Chanel, who are really encouraging shorter hemlines and simpler silhouettes. So Mabel's gown is fitting right into those trends by maintaining a modern yet still ceremonial style and keeping lace as its sort of nod to tradition. So for some visual references here, we can look at some images from the time period that show some similar gowns. And they give us an idea of how Mabel's gown kind of fit into the time period. Thanks to the Library of Congress, we have these sort of reference points here. You can notice the shorter hemlines, the lighter fabric becoming increasingly common. And we're seeing the emergence of a design trend at the intersection of practicality and style. And you'll note that Mabel's gown was really a textbook example of that design trend. So just as they do today, occasionally newspapers featured wedding announcements back in the 1920s. And though the Beckmans wed a century ago, we're very lucky that the details, down to the names of each guest in attendance, were recorded for an article that published in the local newspaper just 2 days later. So this was not standard practice. It was not because the Beckman name carried the same weight then as it might be ascribed today. Rather, it's kind of a stroke of luck that Mabel's family, in this instance, appears to be the one receiving some recognition for their standing within the Greenpoint community. And it's because of this that so much attention in the article is given over to the details of the event, including some of the fashion of the day, specifically the bridal ensemble. And it's from this announcement we're given kind of our starting point for Mabel's overall look that day, including that she chose to wear a veil, which was made of tulle and lace. Lace that apparently we learned that she used in her wedding gown. Now, this is the article that is referencing the gown which we see in photographs in the Beckman Foundation collection. She also had a court train of white satin, which was decorated with a bow knot of orange blossoms. So one note we'll make here, a court train can be a part of the gown itself, or it can be a separate piece, a removable piece. And in this particular case, it was believed to be a separate piece altogether because it was constructed out of satin. That's an expensive and luxurious piece of fabric that coordinated with the gown, but was altogether different. Some other fun details that we know about the fashions at the Beckman wedding. The maid of honor wore a powder blue georgette gown and a gray picture hat. And the flower girl wore a dress in a peach shade along with a leghorn hat. Oh, the historical weather records indicating that June 10th, 1925 was very hot in the area around where Arnold and Mabel were married and celebrated their reception. The church was located in Bayside and the reception in Greenpoint, and there is just 10 miles between the two locations, and temperatures reached into the 90s that day. So the short hemline and the short sleeves on Mabel's gown and its airy fabric would have been practical and stylish choices for a summer wedding with soaring temperatures. So Mabel was in luck. She had it a little bit easier than Arnold, who wore the traditional tuxedo in a, unfortunately, much heavier woolen fabric that day. So a practical and stylish choice for Mabel. And more than simply just a fashion statement, Mabel's wedding gown here is really a cultural artifact. It seemingly reflects her desire as a 1920s bride to be modern, comfortable, and really expressive. It's also speaking to the broader shift in women's roles and expectations that are taking place during this time throughout traditionally rooted neighborhoods like Greenpoint. You can see here sort of the representation of really where style had come from, which was some of these Victorian references to some of these Parisian influences and the changes in the silhouettes. So thank you for joining me today for this textile tour of Mabel's 1925 wedding gown. A really beautiful example of how fashion, culture, and personal expression intersect. We have so much more to share with you from our Milestone Moment celebration of the 100-year wedding anniversary of Arnold and Mabel Beckman, including a message from Beckman Foundation's executive director, some special talks from invited speakers at Northwestern University, Caltech Archives, Chapman University, Science History Institute, New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, as well as special content from the Huntington and Made in the Mist Corporation. So for all of this and more, please visit us at beckman-foundation.org/milestone moment or scan the QR code you see on your screen. Thank you.